Hashem, and we're on page 125. The Ramchal explains how the performance of mitzvot perfects a person on a deeper level. He says the cause of all man's changing circumstances, his periods of darkness and his periods of clarity, is the illumination of Hashem's countenance upon the person, or his withdrawal of it from him, as we have mentioned above. And in note 131 it says, the Ramchal stated above that the illumination of Hashem's countenance is the source and the cause of all perfection, and the concealment of his countenance is the source of all shortcomings. You understand? That's an important principle to get. Okay, so depending on what illumination I have from Hashem's countenance, that's the source and cause of all perfection. When I connect with God on that level, that's what's going to cause me to have, to be able to attain perfection, whatever perfection means in this world. And the concealment of that is going to be the source of all the shortcomings. And he's going to explain that it's also the source of purity or darkness in the physical world, which are the manifestations of perfection and the shortcomings. Okay, so back to the text. It says, for to the degree that Hashem illuminates his countenance, purity and perfection increase in the one to whom his illumination reaches. And in the portion, and in proportion to the amount of illumination, so too will be the amount of perfection and purity that emerges from it. And he says, since Hashem is absolute perfection and the source of all perfection that man can achieve, the more Hashem illuminates his countenance upon a person, the more purified and perfected the person becomes. It is for this reason that David HaMelech, King David, requested three times in the same chapter of Tehillim, that Psalms, that Hashem should illuminate his countenance. We say this actually in the what we call the standing prayer, the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei. We ask God to bless us with the illumination of his face. We're constantly asking that because when we attach ourselves by doing all the mitzvot that we do, by following all those mitzvot, that is what ultimately he's going to say is what allows us to make that attachment. But we still, after that, we have to have a moment where the light bulb goes off, if you will. We have to have, and that only comes from God. We're asking God for that illumination. The opposite is true when it is withdrawn. The more Hashem's countenance is concealed from a person, the more will darkness prevail. And he says the more Hashem is concealed from a person, the more the person's material aspects intensify, causing him to descend from his spiritual level. This is also a possible explanation to depression. If I'm not connected with God, I'm not saying I don't want to get into clinical psychology, so I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, but this is when you remove Hashem from you and you have that emptiness of spirituality. Well, something has to fill that void. So it could be depression is going to fill it. It could be the desire for money. It could be a lot of things that are going to fill that void. There's no void that's left unfilled. That's just the way it is. So what's going on here, just on a simple level, is he's saying that by connecting ourselves with God and by having that spiritual illumination, that's what's going to perfect us. If on the other hand, if that is withdrawn from us because of our actions, he's going to say, then that brings the darkness in. Whatever the darkness is going to be. Like I said, some people would say that is depression. That's the beginnings of depression. And others would just say the darkness is the removal of God from your life, and without looking at depression.
It manifests into different levels of darkness.
Yeah.
Greed, loss.
Right, it could. It could go all over the place, right.
And the key is observance of mitzvot.
Yes, always.
Yeah.
Right. The Ramchal explains how a person experiences either Hashem's illumination or its concealment. He says, Hashem is always illuminating his countenance upon anyone who approaches him. The withholding of good is not from God at all. Rather, one who does not approach him will be lacking his illumination. Thus, the impediment is from the recipient, not the one providing the shefa, the influence. And so consequently, one who receives of Hashem's illumination by approaching him, whereas Hashem is concealed from the one who fails to approach him. Now he says in 137, a person does not find himself in a state of darkness as a result of Hashem's concealment of his countenance from him. Rather, the opposite is so. It is caused by the person's own weakness in serving Hashem. That's what he's coming down to. As the person perfects himself and subdues Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, he removes the barrier between himself and Hashem and can then receive of Hashem's illumination. The Michtav Eliyahu uses the light of the sun as an example, and this is a very nice illustration. The sun is always shining at full intensity. It is only when the windows of the house are blackened that the light is prevented from shining in. Thus, the lack of light is not caused by the sun's being concealed, but by the man not cleaning his windows. Similarly, the person must remove the impediments that prevent Hashem's light from entering his life. Okay, so really is up to us. We can either choose to hide ourselves by causing this darkness to overtake us by not following God's laws, and therefore Hashem does not illuminate our minds to see what's really going on. Or we can go the other way. We can follow the law, and then Hashem will illuminate the world. We have the power to let the sun shine.
And cleaner windows.
Cleaner windows, correct. But that's our thing. You ever notice that people with glasses have this problem? You don't have the problem, you don't have glasses. But people with glasses have this problem. It depends on when you what type of room I'm walking into. If I go outside and it's cold, or the other way, my glasses can fog up. I can't see anything. I have to take them off. On top of that, you always see people going like this. It's so dirty, right? Okay, we have to keep cleaning our glasses because the dust and everything else gets there. If we don't clean it, then our eyes get strained, and we have to usually get more intense glasses, whatever the case is going to be. Which is why some people just wear the contacts to avoid all those problems. I'm not sure how that really works out for everybody, but it's, in other words, does it stop the decay of our eyesight or not? I'm not sure. I think the jury's still out on that. But nonetheless, at least you're not having to clean your eyes every 2 seconds. That's why, by the way, Hashem gave us tear ducts. If you ever think about that. Our eyes are washed every time we blink because we have to get away that dirt. And Hashem immediately gives us that. When you really see that, when you're driving on the highway and you have the windshield, it's not raining, you're just driving, and you notice you can't see much more, and suddenly you turn on the wipers, and with the water, what's it called, the
washer,
window washer, and suddenly, you can see beautifully again. Or you go to the gas station. In the old days, you used to go to the gas station when they used to pump the gas. They actually used to wash your windows for you. That's never to be seen again. But when they did that, you said, whoa, I can see through these again. It's amazing. Again, all these are illustrations of what's going on. If I follow Hashem, then the sun shines in, as it were. I get it. He's illuminating me. If not. But it's not from Hashem. That's the Ramchal's point. It's not from Hashem. Hashem is not in control, if you will, of that element. That's us. We have to make that choice. Okay. So the Ramchal next explains how a person can approach Hashem to benefit from his illumination. He says, the divine wisdom has decreed that the one who complies with those things that he has commanded, for instance, the totality of all the mitzvot, as we have mentioned above, by performing any one of their deeds, through it he will be brought closer by some level to the closeness of Hashem. And he says, by performing any of the 630 mitzvot, a person brings himself closer to in a specific way to Hashem. Previously, the Ramchal explained that the understanding of Torah brings one to the highest level of perfection. Here he states that performance of a mitzvah creates at least some level of closeness to Hashem. And that's going to be an important thing because as we as we'll see what's about to happen there. He says, as a result of this, a level of illumination of his countenance will reach him, proportionate to the closeness that he has developed with him. And he explains that there are 3 ascending steps involved here. Number 1, the person performs a mitzvah. Number 2, he is thus able to approach Hashem to a certain degree. And then finally, the 3rd step is closeness to Hashem enables him to receive of the illumination of Hashem's countenance. See how that's working? You understand how it's working? It's very important. I have to first make the effort. I do the mitzvah. Follow that. Fine. Now, as a result of following the mitzvah, I've gotten closer to God through that mitzvah. And because of that closeness, Hashem can now give me illumination. And then he says, thus he will incorporate within himself a level of perfection, which is a result of that illumination that he has received. And this, he says, is the 4th step. As a result of the illumination he receives from Hashem, the person will reach the proportional level of perfection. By the way, Victor, the reason you get lost is because there's notes in this book. That's I'm going back and forth. Right. So I'm going back and forth. Okay. That's why you're getting a little lost sometimes. But it's that's how he's working this. Now he says Ramchal now explains the effect of sinning. We've heard what mitzvot do is very nice. When I follow a mitzvah, it attaches me. That's the word mitzvah means. It attaches. It's attached me to Hashem. So now if I do an aveira, I'm moving away. In contrast to this are the effective sins. By performing any one of their actions, a person, God forbid, places himself through it some level further removed from Hashem. So it's the exact opposite of what the mitzvah is doing, right? The mitzvah moving closer, a sin, an avera, a transgression, is going to move me away. This situation will only add upon him one of the levels of withdrawal of Hashem's illumination and the concealment of his countenance. And again, into the note, it says, in the parallel discussion about mitzvot, in the previous paragraph, the Ramchal wrote that a level of illumination will reach the person. Here he states that through sinning, concealment of Hashem will add upon him. The natural order of creation follows Hashem's will to bestow goodness on mankind. Therefore, through mitzvot, illumination will naturally reach the person. But one who sins is acting counter to the purpose of creation. Such a person removes himself from Hashem's illumination, the result being that the concealment of Hashem's presence increases and intensifies. So he says, in this way, back to the text, in this way, he will, sorry, I missed something. Okay. The situation will only add upon him, right? One of the levels of withdrawal of Hashem's illumination and the concealment of his countenance. In this way, he will incorporate within himself a level of shortcoming, which emerges from the level of concealment. He says each transgression places a barrier between the person and Hashem, preventing the illumination of Hashem's countenance from reaching him, just like the sun, 30 windows. This is in contrast to a mitzvah, where the resultant closeness to Hashem increases the amount of illumination that reaches him. And he says further, a sin does not merely remove a level of holiness that the person had previously attained. Rather, it adds tuma, this spiritual impurity, to replace the vacuum left by the loss of the holiness. The fact that the person has created a new barrier between himself and Hashem establishes a new shortcoming in his soul. And thus, sin brings about shortcomings in a person in contradistinction to the creation of perfection that occurs through the performance of the mitzvot. You understand? Put it into my favorite thing, dieting. Okay? If one works out and attains, it looks like, I was watching pictures of, what's his name? The guy, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was at his prime of bodybuilding, was unbelievable. Massive. It was maybe his chest is probably 10 to 15 inches bigger than his waist. I'm guessing. It was a total V. And now, he doesn't have, I wouldn't want to run to a dark alley with the guy. He still probably is very strong, probably still take me down. I'm not interested. But you can see he's not fit anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still for a guy, what is he, 60 at this point? But he's not in bad shape for a 60-year-old, or whatever he is, but he's not in the shape he was. And what happened? What happened was he stopped working out that hard. And he probably started to, I don't know if he stopped eating as much as he did when he was working out. I'm assuming he did. I'm assuming he cut himself down too. But nonetheless, he's on the same shape. So that's what's going on here. If I'm working out for my mitzvot, and I'm doing all these things, and I'm getting closer and closer and closer and closer to Hashem, and I'm getting that illumination, well, that's great. But I have to keep that going at that level. I can't slack off and say, well, been there, done that, and I'm all set. No, what's going to happen is by trying to hold where you are, you don't stay there. You go down. That's just the way life is. We never stay at a level. We're either moving up or down. So no such thing as holding yourself. No such thing. We all want to think that, but it's not true. We're either moving up or moving down. That's why when a person doesn't ride a bike for a long time, even though we always say you don't lose that skill, it may be true that I know how to balance, but I certainly cannot get on my bike now and ride my bike as far as I used to. I'll be lucky if I can get around the block, because I don't ride that anymore. My father told me, when you get a car, you'll forget how to ride a bike. Well, it's true. You're not forgetting how to ride it. You just don't ride it, even though it's cheaper on gas. You don't do it, and you're out of shape for that. So even from here to go to the synagogue, which is not even a mile, you're puffing like crazy because you have to go up a little bit of a hill. You probably don't puff because you run all around, right? So you're probably in great shape for that. Kids will be in great shape, but when they get older, suddenly, see, Charles and I don't know, could you get there right without puffing? I don't know.
Rabbi, if I go at a faster speed than I usually go,
then you're going to puff. But what I'm saying is, because you're young, you're going to be in better shape. Okay, that's just the way it is. So here, and we all think that because we achieve that we can always get back there. That's also a lie. This is a great lie we tell ourselves. I need to always work at this. I can never take the day off, which is, and I'll give an example. This works into marriage. When I was young, just married, I was always told, you have to watch out the first couple of years. Those are the years you have to, be very careful with what you're going to say. But once you've made 5-6 years, you're in good shape. Then what do you hear? You hear about the 7-year itch. Okay, fine. So you're not safe at 7. And then I heard of a family that they were married for 20 years and got a divorce. I said to the person telling me, I said, you know what? You just killed me. Now I know I have to work 20 years. That was nothing. Then I heard 30. And the craziest thing was, I read in the paper, I'm sure I told you this before, there was a guy who was 90, this is a true story, 90 years old and his wife was 89, and he was filing for divorce. They were married since 20, or something like that. They were married for many years. And the judge looked at him and said, why would you want to get a divorce? He said, because I've been tortured long enough. But that was his excuse. But I read that and I said, are you kidding? 70 years, I still have to work as hard as the day I got married? It's a lot of pressure. Buy flowers, quick. Okay. But really, it never gives up. And that's what he's telling us. You never can sit back on your laurels and say, I've done this. You always have to work and work and work to have that attachment. And with that attachment, you get that enlightenment. That's what he's saying to us.
I was kind of amazed by Moses. I mean, he was so illuminated that he glowed.
Right.
That's amazing.
Okay. That's a Moses. I wouldn't go for the glow.
Did Enoch get that too?
Not that I know.
I've read.
No, not enough. Okay, so right. Okay, so now we go on. So Ramchal sums up what he has just taught in this chapter. We're finally going to finish this chapter. It says, emerges from all that we have prefaced that one's true intention in all of the mitzvot should be directed towards Hashem, to be near to Him, and to bask in the illumination of His countenance. Similarly, the purpose of refraining from transgressions is to escape that which distances himself from Hashem. That is their true goal. Yet the specific details are extremely profound in relation to the particulars of the man and the world, as we have mentioned above. And he said, each mitzvah represents a specific way one turns to Hashem, and thereby enables a unique level of illumination of Hashem's countenance to reach the person. This is also something that's important. We have 613 commandments, right? So if the only thing is to connect to God, so I may think, okay, I get a choice. I like numbers 1, 20, and 5. But 1's 5 and 20. So I'm going to perfect my observance of that. I'm going to connect to Hashem. Great. Well, again, going back to the bodybuilder, that would be compared to if I like biceps. So I'm going to pick up my weights. I'm going to go like this. Hey, it even goes on the thing. Okay, I'm going to go like this, and it's going to build my bicep up. But the rest of my body is going to go into atrophy. But I have good biceps. That's what he's saying about the mitzvot. If I don't do one or a few of the mitzvot, the ones that I like, yeah, whatever, or the ones I'm challenged by, whatever turns you on for that, then you're not getting the full workout. You'll be in balance, correct? Good. You're going to be in balance. Every single mitzvah has a specific thing that it's doing for us. And Hashem gave it to us so that we should follow what He is demanding of us. He's the trainer, personal trainer. Okay, He knows what we need, and He says this is what is going to get you there. And if you do this, you connect to me, you have this, and you'll be able to have a perfection. If you just do what you want to do, you're going to be off balance. You're who knows what you're going to look like when you come up. Again, you could have the strongest arms, but you could have a weak brain. I don't know. It's not going to really help you at that point. So but that's what he's saying. Each mitzvah has a specific thing that it does, and we have to work those together. Okay. We will further discuss some of the mitzvot in this separate section with God's help. Okay, finally, chapter 5, concerning the components of the creation and their states in particular. So the Ramchal divides the entire created world into two broad categories. He says, the components of the creation in general are two: physical beings and spiritual beings, which we've heard before. So the Ramchal describes the subcategories under the physical and spiritual classifications, beginning with the physical. He says the physical beings are those that can be perceived through our senses. They are divided into celestial beings and terrestrial beings. In other words, he's saying that we can either hear, smell, taste, or feel them, and so on and so forth. And this is interesting that the notes want to say this includes beings that can be perceived only with the aid of scientific instruments, like what's it called, amoeba and so on and so forth. You're not going to see amoeba with your own eyes. So those sort of things. Okay, and the celestial beings are comprised of heavily causative bodies. Now there is a belief. He's going to explain it. That the heavenly bodies affect life on this earth. That is why they were referred to as grumim, which means that they are forces of causative nature influencing the way the lower world functions. If, for example, you have this moon that controls our tides. You have the sun, which obviously gives heat to this planet. So those are considered causative bodies, which are the orbital spheres and their stars. The terrestrial, by the way, if you notice what he's saying, these celestial beings, the Elyonim, they're, according to, again, Jewish thought, they have the sun, the moon, so on and so forth. There's some sort of, I don't know, lack of better words, consciousness to them. In other words, they can argue with God. They can talk to God. They make sounds. And there's music, actually. It was interesting. And when we had the other class in Maimonides, which was on the Gatra Perplex, so he talks about the music of the stars. If you remember, so Jim actually got it from, he downloaded it on Google. And you can hear the sounds of the planets. So it's interesting. So the Rambam, who didn't have Google, okay, he knew that, the rabbis knew that these planets had sounds or some sort of music. I don't know. It's really interesting.
Wait,
But
so the planets are like angels or beings?
no, they're not. They're celestial. God made them, and they have, again, I'm using the word consciousness, but it doesn't really fit what I'm trying to say. But is that sort of awareness, if you will, that they can talk, even the rocks? What do we say in the Midrash? The Midrash says that when Yaakov put the rocks around him, right? So they said, remember, he was up on the, okay, you have to go back to the Torah. So it says that when he was leaving his house, going to his uncle Lavan, and it makes any sense to you? Take my word for it at this point then. He's going to Lavan. So he stops overnight at a place and he puts rocks around his head. He puts rocks to protect him from the animals. Okay, it's straight text. At the end of the story, after he has a dream that God's saying, I'm going to protect you, it says he took that rock that he had put at his head and he anointed it. So everybody says, wait a second. It says he put rocks around his head. Why is there only one rock? So the rabbis fill in the blanks. And they say what happened was the rocks had an argument that they said, I want that tzaddik, the righteous person, to put his head on me. And they all had the argument. So God said, since you all want it, he puts them all together, all 12 rocks. And thus he only had one rock which he anointed. So you can either take that as, oh, a cute little story, okay, or, which I wouldn't do. But there's some real truth behind there, and we have to just figure out what the rabbis are trying to get to, namely that why 12 stones? Because each stone was representative of one of the 12 children, and ultimately became one family, one unit, Bnei Israel. That's a simple way of looking at it, but the other way is that the stones had some sort of consciousness, awareness, that even though we can't see it, we can't understand it, it could be that there's something there. I'm not going to argue against it. I'm not going to argue for it. Like I said, it's not part of the course, but it's something out there that we have to understand. Why does God care so much about these creations? Is it just us? Is it just us that has this awareness, or is there some other level of awareness that we have? All those questions that, again, aren't really part of this class, but something to think about.
Now the stars and planets having sound, that's really weird because sound can't travel through a vacuum because it's one molecule bouncing into another molecule. But it could be electromagnetic waves that get demodulated by our atmospheres to where it can actually.
Okay, whatever. The amazement I had was that he knew it. Okay, not how it happens. That's irrelevant to me at this point. You have a person in the 11th century who's saying that this is what there is. And we have Google, whatever it was, Google Plus, I guess, which actually proved him right. I was just floored when I saw that. I never would have thought about it. I would have assumed it was some midrashic statement. But no, there's something you definitely hear it. Unless you want to say that the space stations are making it up. It could be. I don't know. Well, I'm guessing that they wouldn't have such a conspiracy just to make the Rambam right. Oh. I have to assume that's what's going on. Okay. So now the Ramchal now describes what is included in the spiritual realms. He says, did I finish that or not?
I think you missed the
I'm sorry.
terrestrial beings.
I didn't. Okay. The terrestrial beings are comprised of everything in the lower sphere, which is the land, water, and the atmosphere, and whatever perceivable bodies that are within them. So now the Ramchal describes what is included in the spiritual realms. He says the spiritual beings are the created beings that are devoid of physical matter. They are imperceptible to our senses. And he says by being limited by our physical bodies, we cannot sense spiritual beings. The Ramchal mentions this principle above to explain why we cannot fully comprehend Hashem's simplicity. They are divided into two species, the one being souls and the second transcendent beings. The souls, and we talked about this many times, the souls are a species of spiritual created being, destined to enter our body, to be bound in it, and to be strongly tied to it, and to perform various functions upon it at different times. He says in the notes, all the souls destined. Now this is an amazing statement that they're making in the Gemaras. All the souls destined to enter human bodies have already been created. When Adam Rishon, the first man, was created, all the souls were contained within his soul. Thus, when anyone is born, he receives a part of that soul of Adam. This is the meaning of the Gemara that states that Mashiach, the Messiah, will not arrive until all the souls in the goof, in the body, are culminated. This goof, literally body, refers to the body of Adam Rishon. So it's sometimes hard to understand what's going on here, but apparently, what the Ramchal is telling us is once Adam was created, all the souls that would ever be created were done. And so now we're waiting for God to use them up, as it were. And when that happens, the Mashiach is going to be here. That's only one, according to one opinion. There's 1,000 opinions of when the Messiah will come. Well, not 1,000, but it's. I think there's probably 20 to be specific. And for those who want to know what those are, at least some of them, you can watch my class on the coming. Will the real Mashiach please stand up? Whatever that was called. Okay,
Which contains the job description.
Can change the job description of what the Messiah has to do. Correct. And according to what I'm hearing, the Messiah is coming this year, so get ready. Okay.
Oh boy.
That's right. That's what they're telling me.
Really?
Apparently he watched my video and he decided he can do it.
It's active.
I can do this. Yes, I can do that. Okay. So the Hebrew term, okay, and when we're talking about he's bound to it, so the term there was used with gabel, which means to bind. Alternatively, it can be understood as relating to kneading, that is just as flour and water are kneaded together to form dough, so the soul is joined to the body to form the person. And okay, so that now the transcendent beings are a species of spiritual created being, not at all destined for association with the body. Thus, he explains, thus the soul is in essence different from any other spiritual being. Only the soul is able to successfully enter a human body. Reb Chaim Friedlander explains that when the Malachim, the angels, came to Abraham, our father, in human form, they were not at all joined with a body. Rather, it was like two independent elements connected together without one exerting any influence upon the other. The body did not have any influence over the Malach, unlike the way a person's body influences his soul. So the Malach can have a human body, but it's not going to, the body can't spoil the spirituality of the Malach, which is why a Malach doesn't eat. You think about it, when Noah, when the angel came to Manoach to tell him he's going to have a child, namely Shimshon, Samson. When he told him he was going to have Samson, so Manoach, first after thinking he was going to die because he saw an angel, before that actually, he said, let's have a meal together. And the guy says, no, you give all the meals to God. I'm only the angel. And he went up to turn into fire, whatever it was. And that's when Manoach thought he was going to die. But what we're seeing there is the angel wouldn't eat, because even though he appeared in human form, if you will, he couldn't eat. Even the three malachim, even the three guys that came to Abraham, it says, when it says he served the food, so the rabbi said they just made it appear as if they were eating, but really they didn't, because malachim don't eat.
Like this.
Whatever's going to be, they only made it appear. Okay?
Hide it in the napkin.
Right.
Parts of the Caribbean.
I don't know the reference to that, but okay, I can only assume. Okay. They are further divided into two categories. The first is referred to as supernal forces, and the second as malachim. Now he says, in common English usage, malach is translated as angel. But since it does not convey any real understanding of the term, that's why this book is simply transliterating it as malach. The malachim are Hashem's agents who implement his decrees in this world. And that's it. So you can call it, if you say angels have a mind, that an angel does not have a mind of its own. It can only do what Hashem wants. It is only a messenger. On the other hand, if you also see the word malach, it doesn't need to be a heavenly messenger. It can also be a human messenger. I can send you as a malach. That is used that way in Hebrew. So, but when we're talking about it here, we're talking about a spiritual being. So the malachim also consist of many varied levels, and their realities are governed by natural dictates reflective of their stature and levels. So much so that in truth we are able to refer to all of them as a multiple species of a single class, which is the class of malachi. And he says that even though the malachim are technically a single species, they are so diverse that we can subdivide them further into many different species of a general category. This is unlike the kochot, the powers, which can naturally be classified as a single species. Even though they consist of different types, they are not so diverse as to require further subdivision. In Klale Pischei Chachma, the Ramchal writes that the physical world is naturally divided into classes and then subdivided into various species. Here he states that in a certain sense, malachim can also be viewed that way. Malachim basically are split into 10 categories. There's 10 separate categories. Not going to get into them right now. But one thing that they cannot do is move up or down in their category. We're the only ones who have that upward mobility, and of course we can go down. Malachim do not. They are where they are. They're created, and that's the end of it. That's where they're going to remain.
Is there only males?
There's no such thing as male or female in the celestial world.
Okay, well, there's always got a male name, so just
They have
No. Just because Raphael is, we name a boy by that, each angel is named by what they're supposed to do. So Raphael is from Rophe, is one who's supposed to heal you. Gavriel is coming, he's strong, so he's the one who's going to be leading in war, and so on and so forth. Each one is named for their purpose, and God has no limit to angels. It's like I said, you have 10 levels that Maimonides brings down, but the point is that they can't move up and they can't move down. That's it. They're created that way, and that's it. We, on the other hand, can move up, and we can certainly move down. What we can't do is stay where we are. That's impossible. Like I said, that's not life. Okay. So that was okay. So the Ramchal elaborates on an apparent exception to this rule. He says, however, there is one type of created being that is like an intermediate category between the spiritual and the physical. That is, it is truly not perceived by our senses, and it is also not bound by all the perceived physical matter and its laws.
limits of perceived.
Not bound by all the limits of. I didn't say that. I'm sorry. It's also not bound by all the limits of perceived physical matter and its laws. From this perspective, we will loosely refer to it as spiritual in nature, yet of a separate nature, from the class referred to as Malachi, although it is similar to it in certain ways. So he says, the Gemara Chagiga 20. The Gemara Chagiga relates that Sheidim, commonly translated as demons, are similar to Malachim in three ways. One, they have wings. Two, they fly from one end of the world to the other. And three, can know the future. In other words, they are not limited by space and time of the physical world. That is why they can loosely be called spiritual. But the Gemara concludes that they are like humans in three ways. One is they eat and drink. Two, they procreate. And three, they die. They therefore cannot be categorized as malachim. Rather than they are a sort of intermediate category between the physical and the spiritual. Now, I wouldn't go too crazy with the definition of demon, because when you're looking at these words in Hebrew and we try to encapsulate them in another language, it just doesn't work. But he's saying they're commonly translated in this. So when you see demons, they're talking about Sheidim. But you have to remember that they're neither here nor there. They're not in this world, they're not in the spiritual world, they're in the middle. Why God created them? An interesting question. We'll get into that another time. But they're all part of God's creation. Okay, so that was 20. The species has detailed laws and unique boundaries, reflective of its true reality. This species is referred to as Shediye. I'm sorry, I'll use the Hebrew word. Shediye, that's much easier to read that. Because it is a species of Sheidim. And again, it's unclear what the Ramchal means to explain with this apparent redundancy. The similarity between Shediye and Sheidim is quite obvious. Perhaps he means that we can use the general term Shediye because it encompasses more than one type of shade. Because Shediye it's the grammatical point he's making. He then goes on further to say that since the differing types are subdivided into categories, much as Malachim are, we can consider the Shediye as a class or a type, like the Malachi is considered a class, with many different species of Sheidim included in the category. So it continues, it too is subdivided into other specific varieties, so that the general species is set as a class in relation to them, and they are individual species of it. So the Ramchal presents one being that truly is an exception to the rule. He says the species of man alone is distinguished and separate. He says distinguished possibly refers to a man's body, which can be detected with physical senses, while separate could perhaps refer to his soul, which is spiritual. The species of man alone is distinguished and separate by being composed of two types of creation that are totally separate one from another. That is, man is composed of the elevated soul and the lowly body, which is not to be found in any other created being. And he explains that this combination of a purely spiritual being and a totally physical object is actually incomprehensible. How can a spiritual being become contained inside a physical body? About this improbable combination, we recite the bracha, Hashem heals all flesh and acts wondrously. So now we're going to have to stop here. This is a good place to stop. So we'll stop here on page 137.